With a twitch of her nose, Samantha Stevens bewitched a generation of TV viewers and made Elizabeth Montgomery a star.
Bewitched put ABC on the map.
But the show, which in hindsight seemed so innocent and guileless, was a lightning rod for controversy.
They said it would never sell in the Middle West or the South because witches were evil.
I've always wanted dishpan hands. Makes a witch feel like she belongs.
The theme in Bewitched of a witch married to a mortal seems to be suggestive of the bringing together of the races, which was still highly troublesome in the 1960s.
And the grind of a weekly series took its toll on the cast.
She hated being asked to twitch her nose. She hated that. She hated being asked to do it.
Still, Bewitched enchanted a nation torn by war and revolt.
People liked the fact that they could escape to this sort of like nice, safe world of television at this very unsafe time.
In the next 2 hours, we will tell you the magical story of Bewitched. You'll meet Elizabeth Montgomery, the sexy suburban witch.
They lucked out because Elizabeth Montgomery never occurred to me. She's an all-American, clean-cut girl, a witch.
A zany cast of characters.
Abner, come to the window. Look at this, a tree growing there, and it wasn't there a minute ago.
And the two Darrens. The first, Dick York, endured chronic back pain and a pill dependency that drove him from the show.
We wouldn't always know on a Monday morning or a Tuesday morning whether he was going to be able to make it or not.
And Dick Sargent, who was desperate to hide his homosexuality.
When my lover was alive, he felt very strongly about being in the closet, and that we should, I had a phony ex-wife in my bio.
I don't think the audience knew it, but they didn't know that Rock Hudson was either.
And in an exclusive interview, Erin Murphy, who played Tabitha, talks about her confusion between fact and fiction.
My mom said, well, we don't have any eggs. And I said, well, I'll just twitch some up.
You want me to vacate the premises?
We will follow the cast through the years when tedium set in and the audience turned away.
Relevant themes were happening, more religious themes, more racial themes that you couldn't do in the early 60s.
And we will witness the darkest time of all, as Elizabeth Montgomery fought for her life.
I thought she would beat it. I never dreamed that we could lose her.
This is the story behind the magic of one of the best-loved shows in television history. This is the story of Bewitched, the true Hollywood story.
For life's ambition was to be a star.
Never recover from the public scandal.
50,000 marchers in downtown San Francisco, where anti-war songs and speeches trigger a short scuffle between pro and con factions.
There are vivid images of the early 1960s. The civil rights movement, the dramatic showdown with the Soviet Union, and the growing tension in Vietnam revealed a nation in turmoil. Americans often tuned out the disturbing events by tuning in primetime television. TV guide writer Matt Roush.
I think people liked the fact that they could escape to this sort of like nice, safe world of television at this very unsafe time.
That safe world was reflected on TV in sitcoms that captured the ideals and innocence of the 50s. Screen Gems, the television arm of Columbia Pictures, was responsible for many of the network shows. Bewitched biographer Herbie J. Pilato.
Screen Gems was a powerhouse. They, had done the Dinah Reed show, Father Knows Best, and they were just cranking them out left and right. They were very family-oriented programming. Many shows like Gidget and The Flying Nun, all of were produced by Harry Ackerman.
Harry Ackerman was the programming guru for Screen Gems, and in the spring of 1963, Ackerman had an idea for a new television series. He turned to writer Saul Sachs to write the pilot episode.
He was the one who called me, said, we'd like to do a series. Can we talk? And we met at Musso Frank's, and we pitched around ideas, and a witch living as a mortal was what I went home with.
Clever, but not a groundbreaking idea in Hollywood.
I don't want you any different, not at all.
I want to be quite different.
My only objection was there's movies called Bell, Book and Candle I married a witch, we could be sued. He says, no, we don't have to worry about that. Columbia Pictures owns those.
The concept was given a green light by Screen Gems. Sachs and Ackerman then hammered out the storyline for the show.
Once you have the idea, that is the tough thing. And it certainly gave me my first premise, because the audience finding out this was a witch, and her husband on his wedding night found out she was a witch. Well, that's a premise right there.
A bewitching premise, in fact. 3 weeks after his initial meeting with Harry Ackerman, Sachs delivered the pilot script for Bewitched. Sachs's lead characters, Darren Stevens and his sorceress wife Samantha, were very much the prototype 50s couple. Director-producer William Asher.
Thematically, it was two people who could have anything they want, and who wanted nothing but what the husband could provide.
Other television shows stereotype married couples in a different fashion.
A young husband and wife where the husband would screw up everything and the wife would get it fixed, and then he'd say, see, I told you I could get it fixed, and she says, yes, dear, you're so smart and intelligent, I don't know what I'd do without. That was pretty much the theme of domestic comedies.
But Samantha Stevens was no ordinary housewife.
It was her choice to give up the magic because she loved him. She could have had anybody, done anything, gone anywhere, you know, had the most perfect person in the whole world, but she chose Darren, you know, a regular guy.
Bewitched director Richard Michaels.
Darren was a very clever advertising man and had a lot of creative ideas and was very determined to make a success on his own. He fell in love with a woman who happened to be a witch, and she tried very hard to not let that get in the way. Of course, one of the problems she had is that her family, and particularly her mother, would often come into the picture.
And Dora was the embodiment of the meddling mother-in-law, in more ways than one.
The fact that she's a witch and she can do anything she wants, and so can her daughter, she's just appalled that her daughter would give this life up to marry this mere mortal.
He took her daughter away from the witch world. She was really threatened by that. And that he didn't really have any power over her, no magic power, but love. And she, you know, she couldn't get into that.
By the summer of 1963, the characters for Bewitched were in place, and producers were ready to cast the lead roles. Writer Saul Sachs had an actress in mind to play Samantha.
I had just seen a picture with Tammy Grimes in there. She was a fine actress and had that wonderful elf-like quality.
Grimes read the script and liked the show, but she was already committed to a Broadway musical. Instead, the role went to a charming and talented actress who cast a spell on TV audiences. Born April 15, 1933, Elizabeth Montgomery was a child of Hollywood. While most of the country sank deeper into the Great Depression, the daughter of actor Robert Montgomery enjoyed a privileged upbringing during the golden age of film. Elizabeth's son, Bill Asher.
She definitely had this very ladylike behavior that she had to live by to appease her folks. But she was a child that loved to just play and get dirty.
Elizabeth was a spirited child who wanted to follow in her father's footsteps.
Her father, being an actor, I think was inspiring to her in a way, but it was definitely in her heart to be a performer.
In 1950, when she was 17, Elizabeth's family moved to New York, where her father entered the fledgling television business. Montgomery developed his own series, and in 1951, 18-year-old Elizabeth made her acting debut on Robert Montgomery Presents.
When they finally did the scene and it was live on television, her first line to her father was, "Hi, Pop," when he walked into the scene, and he was the one who got choked up and stunned by, oh my gosh, I'm working with my daughter.
The young actress soon became a part of the ensemble cast while she pursued other opportunities, including guest starring roles on the Kraft Theater and Studio One. At the age of 21, Elizabeth met and fell in love with Fred Kamen, a stage manager on her father's show. After a brief courtship, the couple married on March 2nd, 1954. Although she was successful in New York, Elizabeth was anxious to conquer Hollywood. Unfortunately, her husband wanted to remain in Manhattan. After about a year of marriage, the couple divorced, and Elizabeth headed west. Montgomery made her film debut in The Court-Martial of Billy Mitchell, co-starring Gary Cooper and Rod Steiger. Elizabeth's performance impressed film critics and Hollywood heartthrob Gig Young.
I'm the city that never sleeps.
Starring Gig Young, a young cop, married and unhappy.
On December 28, 1956, Elizabeth Montgomery and Gig Young were married in a small ceremony in Las Vegas. The honeymoon didn't last long. 24-year-old Elizabeth soon learned that 42-year-old Young was an alcoholic. To escape the fiery arguments at home, Elizabeth pursued her career in earnest. She appeared in a variety of television shows, including Alfred Hitchcock Presents and The Twilight Zone. In 1952, Elizabeth met director William Asher during an audition for the film Johnny Cool. Shortly after the film wrapped, Elizabeth realized she was in love with the 41-year-old director. By the spring of 1963, Elizabeth was fed up with her hard-drinking husband, Gig Young, and she quietly flew to Mexico and filed for divorce, ending their 6-year marriage. Within months of her divorce, Elizabeth Montgomery and William Asher secretly eloped. Elizabeth was 30, Asher was 42. Twice divorced, Elizabeth was ready to settle down and start a family. But Asher had other ideas and impressive credentials to back them up. A successful director in motion pictures and television, Asher's TV credits included I Love Lucy and the 1962 Birthday Bash for John F. Kennedy. The highlight of the gala event was Marilyn Monroe's breathy version of Happy Birthday.
I can now retire from politics after having had Happy Birthday sung to me in such a sweet...
By 1963, Elizabeth's career was flourishing. She was offered a starring role in a TV Western series. But to the surprise of her husband, William Asher, Elizabeth turned it down.
I finally said to her, what if we did a television series? We did it together. And she said, oh, that'd be great. I'd love to do that.
Asher pitched an idea for a new television pilot to executives at Columbia Screen Gems.
They said, we like it, but we have something else that is similar. And you might like it better.
And Harry Ackerman then said, well, look, this one, instead of her being rich, she's a witch. Instead of witchcraft, we've got some witchcraft.
The Ashers were hooked. But first, the couple needed to convince producers that Elizabeth was Samantha.
It was very heavy. It was real witchy. It just had that kind of a flavor. So I said, let me do a rewrite, and I'll give it to you.
Screen Gems executives liked the changes, and Elizabeth landed the role.
I think they lucked out, because I think Elizabeth Montgomery, which never occurred to me, she's an all-American, clean-cut girl, a witch, but it was wonderful. And of course, she was so adorable and a good actress.
In the summer of 1963, studio powerhouse Columbia Screen Gems placed veteran director William Asher at the helm of its new television series, Bewitched. The show starred Asher's wife, actress Elizabeth Montgomery, as Samantha, a sorceress turned housewife. In September 1963, director William Asher began casting for the remaining characters in Bewitched. Both Asher and Elizabeth Montgomery thought Dick Sargent was perfect for the role of Darren Stevens, Samantha's bewildered husband. Bewitched biographer Herbie J. Pilato.
Dick Sargent was originally approached about playing Darren when they were going to do the pilot, but he went on and he was contracted with, I think, Universal to do a show, another show, and he couldn't do it.
Asher then thought of actor Dick York. 36-year-old York was a tall and gangly man with a great sense of comedic timing. York was best known for his dramatic portrayal alongside Gene Kelly in Inherit the Wind. A frequent guest performer on TV dramas and series, York appeared on such notable shows as Alfred Hitchcock Presents, Rawhide, and Wagon Train.
Dick York had completed an incredible roster of credits before he came to Bewitched. He was an incredible stage actor. He did much television.
York nailed the audition for Bewitched and landed the role of Darren Stevens. With Samantha and Darren in place, Asher needed just the right look for the meddlesome mother-in-law. While the director pored over headshots, Elizabeth ran into screen actress Agnes Moorehead in a New York department store.
She went right up to her and said, "Have you ever thought of working in television?" And Agnes Moorehead was like, "Well, maybe, maybe not." And that was the exact attitude that Elizabeth wanted for Mother, or that she saw happening for Endora. And they hired her like right on the spot.
64-year-old Moorehead was a 4-time Academy Award nominee. Her career spanned more than 4 decades. Moorehead's climb to stardom began on the New York stage in the early 1930s. By 1938, Moorehead joined Orson Welles and his historic Mercury Theater group. Moorehead appeared with the legend in one of Hollywood's most celebrated films.
They all worked together on films like Citizen Kane, which is one of the most incredible films ever made. So this was very high caliber talent.
William Asher and Agnes Moorehead needed no introduction. In 1960, they had worked together at NBC. Asher was convinced Moorehead was perfect for the role of Endora. Moorehead wasn't so sure.
She didn't think it was going to be a hit and had no intention of really sticking with the series. She goes, "Well, I'll do it. It'll probably, blow over, never make anything of it, and that'll be it."
By the fall of 1963, the principal cast was in place, and the pilot episode of Bewitched was ready to roll. Almost. Director-producer William Asher was stumped about how Samantha would exercise her magical powers.
I was looking for something that would motivate the witchcraft.
And Bill Asher had remembered that Elizabeth had like a little nervous gesture she used to make. And he was trying to jog her memory on what she did and how she did it.
And she said, "What?" And I tried to show her, and she said, I don't know what you're talking about." And I said, "Nah, come on, And
he kept on prodding her and prodding her. And she goes, "I don't know." And she did it. And he goes, "That's it." And the Twitch was born.
Finally, Screen Gems was ready to shop for corporate sponsorship of Bewitched. The Quaker Oats Company promptly stepped in.
Of the Quaker Oats Company.
In the 60s, TV networks sold entire time slots to sponsors, and the oatmeal giant owned the 9 o'clock to 9:30 p.m. slot on Thursdays on ABC. Executives from Screen Gems and Quaker Oats were ready to pitch the network when the unexpected happened. Writer Saul Sachs.
I got called from Harry Ackerman, who said, "Got good news and bad news." Good news and bad news thing. Good news is we sold it right away. The bad news is Liz is pregnant. They talked about doing it as Lucy had done it, at showing her as pregnant. I resisted, and I remember shouting out, "A pregnant witch!" It was inconceivable.
Screen Gems executives agreed until the producer came up with an idea.
They shot around her. As she got bigger, they would do close-ups, and then they would use a stand-in.
Finally, rehearsals were set to begin for the pilot. The date was November 22nd, 1963, and suddenly, without warning, tragedy struck an entire nation. President John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, Texas. William Asher and Elizabeth Montgomery were close personal friends of the president. They were especially shocked and saddened by the news.
We didn't know what to do. We didn't know whether to cancel the reading or what to do, so we finally decided to do what he would do, which is do the pilot.
While America mourned the death of President Kennedy, Bewitched cast members struggled to get through the production.
We started shooting on Monday. People were so upset that it was hard to get the rehearsal.
In addition to the somber mood, there were other problems plaguing the production of the pilot.
We had trouble with Dick York in that he was late and was slurry in his talk, and then it would clear up and it was okay. But we were a little worried about it.
4 years earlier, Dick York sustained a serious back injury while filming a Western with Gary Cooper. The pain medication caused York to be slightly incoherent and to slur his words. But the easygoing actor worked through the pain, and the chemistry he shared with Elizabeth was, well, magical. Asher stuck by the ailing actor. Despite all the problems, the Bewitched pilot was completed in the winter of 1963. Executives from Screen Gems and sponsor Quaker Oats then pitched the show to ABC. To their surprise, ABC didn't bite. Network execs had concerns about the theme of the show.
They said it would never sell in the Middle West, the South, because witches were evil, married to the devil, and I mean, it was absurd.
The bosses at ABC tested their hunch with several network affiliates.
And as they had predicted, it was turned down all to the South and parts of the Midwest and into Texas, and they went with something else.
But higher-ups at Quaker Oats believed in the project. After adding Chevrolet as a sponsorship partner, ABC agreed to broadcast the show. With the pilot sold, William Asher and Elizabeth Montgomery were free to concentrate on their budding family. And on July 24th, 1964, Elizabeth delivered a baby boy, William Asher.
Once upon a time, there was a typical American girl.
And just 2 months later, on September 17th, 1964, the pilot episode of Bewitched premiered.
It so happens that this girl is a witch.
So my wife's a witch. Every married man has to make some adjustment.
TV Guide didn't like it. Fans loved it. And then everybody loved it. It was one of those things where, okay, if nobody likes it, maybe we'll like it. But since everybody likes it, all right, now we love it.
With a twitch of her nose, Elizabeth Montgomery conjured up a hit TV series. By late spring 1964, after months of haggling between executives at Screen Gems and ABC, Bewitched was added to the network's fall schedule. On September 17, 1964, the pilot episode premiered. Bewitched was greeted with mixed reviews from critics, but fans were crazy about the show and about Elizabeth Montgomery as the adorable witch. During the fall of 1964, Bewitched worked magic on ABC's Thursday night lineup. Biographer Herbie J. Pilato.
They're pulling in all these incredible ratings. You know, Bewitched put ABC on the map.
Director Richard Michaels.
Elizabeth Montgomery was so charming and so appealing, and cast in this role, which was just perfect for her, as this adorable person, this whole other version of what we would think of as a witch. The good witch, so to speak.
Casey Rogers played Louise Tate.
Elizabeth as Samantha covered a lot of territory. She was like the wife every young man wanted to have, and the daughter every parent wanted, the mommy every little kid wanted. She just fulfilled so many warm, loving roles. I think that was very special.
Elizabeth was special, and so was her unique brand of sorcery.
Samantha's twitch, of course, I think endeared her to everybody, and everybody in the country has tried to twitch their nose, but can't.
Actually, it wasn't her nose that twitched, it was her upper lip. So if you really want to try, you know, you gotta make sure you move the upper lip. And then the nose just falls into place.
Despite the show's enchanting premise, there was more to Bewitched than met the eye.
Pushing the envelope in those days didn't take a lot of pushing because the envelope was so closed. Things were very, very staid.
Bewitched writer Richard Bayer.
I can't recall ever having a story conference and saying, let's do something daring, let's do something issue-oriented, there might be a general theme of don't pick on other children.
Pushing the envelope in 1964 included a subtle approach to a hidden theme.
The series itself deals with prejudice to the extent that you have a mixed marriage. I don't know how many of the audience actually thought of it as a mixed marriage, but we conceived the show that way.
TV Guide critic Matt Roush.
You have to think that people watching Samantha stand up for who she was and sometimes turn prejudices on their head, often comedically, often fantastically, still resonated with the people who watched.
I think a lot of people who felt they were having trouble in their marriage would look at it and go, geez, you know, if Sam and Darren are getting along, that means maybe we can too, honey, no matter how different, you know, we see a particular thing.
In the spring of 1965, as the first season came to a close, rival networks scrambled to copy ABC's success.
Television has a habit of cloning popular things. So when Bewitched went on in 1964 and became a immediate hit, you know, everybody started to think about what they could do in terms of fantasy.
Executives at Screen Gems were eager to leverage their hit show and developed a new series for NBC. Acclaimed author Sidney Sheldon was hired to write the pilot. Ironically, Sheldon turned to friend William Asher for help.
Sidney came to me and said, I have this kind of rip-off of you, and he explained to me what it was.
The new show, I Dream of Jeannie, was not a clone of Bewitched, but it was close.
Right down to the opening animated credit sequence with Jeannie coming out of the bottle. You know, that was taken, obviously, from Bewitched.
I Dream of Jeannie was also a hit, but Bewitched remained at the top of the ratings. The series went into the second season of production in May 1965. The first day back on the set, 32-year-old Elizabeth announced she was pregnant with her second child. The director worked around Elizabeth's first pregnancy during filming of the pilot in November of '63. This time, it would be front and center.
Either you're going to shut down the show while Elizabeth goes and has a baby, or you're going to incorporate her pregnancy into the show. And of course, she's married, so why shouldn't she have a baby? And so obviously Samantha got pregnant at the same time.
On September 23, 1965, fans of the show learned that their favorite witch was expecting a baby.
Okay, what's so important?
I'm going to have a baby.
Good. You're what?
I'm going to have a baby.
You're kidding.
Honest.
As Lucille Ball before her, Elizabeth Montgomery gained national attention with her pregnancy. And on October 5, 1965, Elizabeth and William welcomed their second child. They named him Robert Asher. Soon after Robert's birth, millions of TV viewers met Tabitha, the baby girl born to Samantha and Darren Stevens.
Oh, isn't she beautiful?
I think she's beautiful. Don't get too close.
There was great expectation about this baby. What kind of baby is this lady this witch gonna have?
Sam, is she or isn't she?
Darling, you know as much as I do. But if she starts levitating bottles in the nursery, let me know, huh?
The audience was as curious as the family was about baby Tabitha's powers.
We were always looking for signs to whether Tabitha could actually do witchcraft. And then eventually something would happen that there was no explanation for, and they would look at the little baby and wonder whether she did it.
Dozens of little girls auditioned for the role of Tabitha.
We looked for twins because you can't work children more than a few hours, and if we'd be all day on the set and have the little girl for 2 hours, that wasn't enough time to do the scenes that we needed.
Diane and Erin Murphy were finally cast to play the littlest witch.
They wanted someone who looked a little bit more like Elizabeth, so was lucky, went in and they chose. Actually, I auditioned with my fraternal twin sister Diane. They were only auditioning twins, and they hired us both to play Tabitha.
What we would do is use Erin for a couple of hours, and when she couldn't work anymore, we'd use Diane, or vice versa.
It wasn't long before producers decided Erin should take over the role.
The decision to have one of the children play the part rather than the other was dictated by the fact that as they got a little older, they didn't look quite the same anymore.
When they realized that we were fraternal and didn't look that much alike, then I took over the part.
For young Erin Murphy, it wasn't always easy to separate fantasy from reality.
I was at home when I was very little, and my mom asked what I'd like for breakfast, and I said, I want eggs for breakfast. And she said, well, we don't have any eggs. And I said, well, I'll just twitch some up.
Being the only child on the set, Erin had to find creative ways to amuse herself.
Elizabeth had those beads that were popular back then that hung in front of the doors, and she had her dressing room door. All the guest stars that were ever on the show would sign her door, and I was so excited when I was actually old enough to write my name on her door, and I wrote this huge E.
Tabitha added an exciting new dimension to Bewitched, and producers decided to add another twist when Samantha's mischievous cousin showed up.
She had dark hair, and she was totally different than Samantha, except that her face was the same because it was the same actress.
Compared to Samantha, Serena was a vamp, and Elizabeth Montgomery jumped all over the new role. Actor Bernie Capel.
Some days I was happier than others, seeing, oh goody, she's wearing shorts, isn't that lovely? Look at that. Oh, can't she wear a mini skirt or something like that? Oh, she's going to be walking in front of me, and all of that salacious stuff.
I don't think she was bored with playing Samantha, but she always felt Samantha was a little bit too nice, and she wanted to, expand her theatrics on the show.
It gave Liz a chance to sing and dance and be mischievous and do all the things that she wanted to do.
Elizabeth had so much fun playing nice and naughty, she made sure the charade was not exposed.
In the rolling credits at the end of the show, there'd be, Samantha, Elizabeth Montgomery, Darren Dick York, and then the part of Serena was played by Pandora Spox. And because of that, so many fans at home really thought that it was another actress who was playing the role.
Even producers were fooled by Samantha's beguiling cousin, Serena.
Elizabeth was on the set with the black wig, looking pretty hot. And Jerry Davis was like, who's this brunette? And so he goes up and he's talking to her, and he's flirting with her, having no idea that it's Elizabeth Montgomery, and he's just about to ask her to dinner, and she flips off the wig.
But for husband William Asher, there was an unexpected bonus.
Once when she was playing Serena, we finished the day with her in the Serena. So instead of going home, we went to a motel and played out the whole idea of calling home and saying, I'm sorry, I'm working at the office with the other writers, and we spent the night there. And we went home early in the morning and changed and came in.
Most of the time, however, Montgomery and Asher were all business.
Elizabeth Montgomery was involved probably in every aspect of that show, from casting to the Gophers, on the set.
She read all the scripts when they came in from the writers and suggested her ideas, but Bill was the guiding force behind the show.
But Elizabeth was the guiding force at home. Son, Bill Asher.
She instilled, values and morals in us that would help us become healthy, young adults that cared about the world around us.
Being married to the director had its perks. Bill made provisions that allowed Elizabeth to spend time with the kids.
And my father made a point to allow her to leave the set early if there was something going on at home, and she felt she needed to be close to us.
After 2 seasons on ABC, Bewitched was one of America's highest-rated programs, consistently landing among the top 10 shows. NBC countered with its own brand of wizardry, I Dream of Jeannie. By the summer of '66, all 3 networks scrambled to create more magical sitcoms. But the producers of Bewitched had some clever tricks up their sleeves to fend off the competition. The fall of 1966 marked the beginning of the 3rd season of Bewitched, and a whole new look for the show. Bewitched biographer Herbie J. Pilato.
All or mostly all shows were going to color, and the fact that Bewitched was a fantasy show lent itself to color, and color lent itself to fantasy. I remember Elizabeth telling me that after she saw Larry Tate, David White as Larry Tate on screen for the first time in color, she turned to him and said, "I didn't know your eyes were that blue."
Elizabeth Montgomery's character, Samantha, sparkled in living color. TV Guide critic Matt Roush.
She had sort of this glamour aura to her. I mean, it was almost like a Grace Kelly of television almost to me. Of course, I was a kid at the time watching it. She seemed like a princess at times, Samantha. And for her to just twitch her nose and have magic happen, it kind of had a girlish quality.
In season 2, Samantha's daughter Tabitha and mischievous cousin Serena became regulars on the series.
Hi, Sammy! Hi, Prairie.
When the casting net went out, producers reeled in Paul Lynde. Lynde was a comedic actor, best known for his work on The Perry Como Show and the Broadway and film versions of Bye Bye Birdie.
Paul Lynde was incredible. He only did like 8 or 9 episodes of the show, but his presence was so strong that everybody thinks he's done like 40.
Paul Lynde's personality was so unique that on our show or anywhere else he appeared, he was outstanding. So he made a mark bigger than the number of shows he did.
In his first appearance on the show in 1965, Lynde played Samantha's harried driving instructor.
N is for neutral, where you place lever to start car.
Odd, isn't it? You think they'd call it S or SC.
Bewitched writer Richard Baer.
She was driving him nuts and not doing too well.
Stop! I said stop! I told you to turn right.
But it was one way, the wrong way.
And they were blocking traffic, and a guy repeatedly is honking his horn, and Paul Lynde calls out the window at him, "Selfish." He said it with such disgust and such disdain that it was hysterical.
Selfish! Selfish!
I wouldn't have written it for anybody else, and nobody else would have done it the same, but it was probably my favorite line. It wasn't even a joke.
Elizabeth and Paul just fell in love with each other. They absolutely adored each other. And it was at that point that she said to Bill Asher, you know, let's get this guy in on a regular basis or semi-regular basis.
Lynde was cast as the outlandish warlock Uncle Arthur.
Uncle Arthur. Uncle Arthur. What happened?
I don't know, I was just sitting here, feeling like the devil.
Oh, terrific.
What he was a practical joker. He loved using his witchcraft to play jokes on people.
When I'm up there in that big blue yonder, I feel like Superman.
Oh, my stars!
And he would get hysterical with some of the things that he did.
Able to leap tall buildings in a single bound.
Witches and warlocks were perceived on the show in general as eccentric. You know, he was just the most eccentric of the eccentric.
On camera and off, Lynde was flamboyant, unconventional, and gay. And he didn't give a damn what anyone thought. Actor Bernie Capel.
I don't know if anybody connected it with, you know, this great verboten at the time of, oh my goodness, is he, you know, using all those politically incorrect things? Is he light on the loafers or any of that stuff? Paul had that courage, that bravery, where he didn't appear to care.
We didn't write gay characters in those days. It was no secret that everybody thought Paul Lynde was gay, but it didn't stop him.
He just let it rip, and that's what we have. That's our legacy of the art of Paul Lynde.
Paul Lynde's success prompted the producers of Bewitched to court a slew of guest stars, including the man who would be Batman.
I was a little nervous going in because I was playing a very suave, romantic, fairly good-looking guy, and I'm just a cowboy from Walla Walla, Washington, and it's all an act. Oh, God, it's just so difficult to be suave.
This is an actor's dream. Bill would call up and say, "Hey, Bernie, how are you? How's your tennis game? You all right?" Little social stuff. Could you do 100-year-old apothecary? Actors always lie. Of course I can. Lied. And after you hang up, you say, how the hell do I do this?
Actor Bernard Fox made a guest appearance on the show.
I started as a fella called Osgood Reitmeyer, and he was a man who could disable witches.
Later, Fox joined the cast in the role of Dr. Bombay.
Dr. Bombay was a witch, and every time Elizabeth got into trouble or some sort of ailment, she'd say, Dr. Bombay, come right away. And I would appear from some outlandish country.
Samantha, you plucked me right off me dolphin.
Unfortunately for the actors, technicians creating the special effects couldn't employ magic.
I had to appear in a ring of flame all around me. And they had a wooden box, a round wooden box going around me, and they put some kind of gunpowder in it, I suppose. And when it went off, it scorched my butt, I want to tell you. Nowadays, they'd probably do it with computer animation and stuff.
Audiences adored the revolving cast of wacky characters that literally appeared out of nowhere, including Johnny Whitaker, the young actor who played Jody on Family Affair. In season 3, when actress Irene Vernon left Bewitched to pursue other interests, Casey Rogers joined the cast.
When I got the job, I was delighted, but when I got on the set, I felt like a fish out of water because the cast and crew had worked together for 2 years, and I was like newcomer.
But Rogers soon settled into her role as Louise Tate.
She never knew what was happening. I mean, she was always wide-eyed and bright and upbeat and happy, but she never quite understood all of these things that were going on around her, which is fine, because, you know, then there's something for everybody to play off of.
But the third season was also marred by tragedy. The entire cast was stunned when Alice Pearce, who played the nosy neighbor Gladys Kravitz, suddenly passed away in March 1966. Actress Sandra Gould replaced Alice, playing the long-suffering neighbor who never knew what to expect when she looked next door.
Our street has turned into a harbor! Come on now!
I was always yelling for him. And he would look and he'd say, you're crazy, you know? And this is what became funny, you know?
Bewitched was loved by audiences who tuned in by the millions for their weekly fix of witchcraft. And the cast worked hard to perfect the special effects unique to the show.
If I was holding my purse here, and the purse was going to be popped off, they would say, freeze, and so you take the purse and you're sitting like this, you know, and then they say action, and then you can, oops, what happened to the purse?
This was very dependent on the actors not moving, because if the hand went from here to here, you know, you could see that jump. But after a while, we got very proficient at this.
For the next 2 seasons, 1967 to 1969, Bewitched continued to surprise viewers and defy critics, ranking among TV's top 12 programs. The light-hearted comedy helped audiences escape from the horror stories out of Southeast Asia being recounted in graphic detail on the nightly news.
There was so much going on in the 60s with Vietnam, you know, the race rioting. And the way Elizabeth Montgomery presented Samantha was that she had this secret and that she could really not talk about who she really was. And I think a lot of people who felt prejudiced against in the 60s or isolated bonded with her.
ABC executives were anxious to renew Bewitched for 3 more seasons in the spring of 1969. But after 170 episodes playing America's lovable witch Samantha, 36-year-old Elizabeth Montgomery was bored with the role.
There wasn't the same bubble and energy that you saw in the early episodes. She was kind of like just going through, you know.
Friend, actress Liz Sheridan.
She hated being asked to twitch her nose, which... Have you ever tried that? It is impossible. I don't know how she did it. You can't. It's just... Anyway, she hated that. She hated being asked to do it. She wanted to be respected as a dependable actress rather than just do comedy.
Montgomery also wanted to spend more time with her 2 children, Billy 7 and Robert 6. Then, in early 1969, Elizabeth prepared to give birth to her 3rd child.
She didn't get sick. She kept working every day, you know. I couldn't understand it. I thought, I don't know where she gets the strength. And she'd be in every scene and know every line. She never blew anything. She was, I mean, I found her incredible.
Son, Bill Asher.
I don't know how she did it. Wonder Woman. And I remember her saying, that she never felt she would really win you know, Mother of the Year award, but I have a feeling that my brother and my sister and I would be more than happy to hand that one over to her.
Meanwhile, negotiations with ABC heated up.
We decided not to go on. We were going to do something else. And when ABC got news of it, they went crazy.
Crazy enough to sweeten the deal with unprecedented incentives.
They offered us so much money and participation, ownership, that we finally sat down and talked about it and said, look, let's take what they're giving us and go on with the show.
The deal was simply too good to refuse. The Ashers agreed to work for 4 more years on Bewitched in exchange for more money, 50% ownership of the show, and creative control. Coming up, Darren #1 falls apart.
There would be times when he couldn't come to work, and that put a lot of stress on us.
And Darren #2 has something to hide.
Everybody who was on the company knew it. I don't think the audience knew it.
With a new contract from ABC, the cast and crew of Bewitched rallied to finish season 5 in the spring of 1969. But trouble was lurking just around the corner. For 10 years, Dick York suffered from a painful back injury. Throughout the 5th season, York's condition worsened. Erin Murphy, who played little Tabitha Stevens, tried to help ease the tension.
He had a special kind of slant board that he would lean on in between scenes, and he told me since that one of the ways he was able to get through that is just when I would come and sit on his lap, I would cheer him up, and it made him kind of forget about the pain.
Despite his suffering, York rarely complained. Cast member Casey Rogers.
He said, yeah, well, I have this back problem. And then he would not dwell on it.
He was in constant agony through 5 years. I mean, it was just amazing that he made it that long, and he was a trooper.
By February 1969, 40-year-old York was unable to do the physical comedy required for the role. Cast and crew members tried to work around his injury.
The last season that he was on Bewitched, he was in so much pain that they had to either show him his character was sitting down or lying down.
Show director Richard Michaels.
In the 5th year of the show, there would be times when he couldn't come to work. And that put a lot of stress on us. We wouldn't always know on a Monday morning or a Tuesday morning whether he was going to be able to make it or not, and we'd have to kind of shift shows in midstream.
Cast member Sandra Gould.
He was on all kinds of pain pills, and it finally got so bad that he just couldn't work anymore, and it was devastating. It was just awful, but you could just see the pain in his eyes.
York became increasingly addicted to painkillers. Asher was forced to make drastic script changes.
I would have to do scripts without Darren. The beginning would show him leaving.
Bye, Daddy.
Bye, Daddy.
And the end would show him coming back.
I am home.
And then I'd shoot the whole body of the show without him.
Asher's creative trickery worked. By the end of the 5th season, 30 original episodes of Bewitched were filmed, with York appearing in only 20.
Darren would be off in some work assignment in, you know, the city or Chicago, and it would just be about Samantha and the witch world. And strangely enough, those episodes didn't work.
I don't think the shows without him were as effective as the shows with him, because he's an integral part of the show. We didn't do a series about a witch, we did a series about a witch married to a mortal.
In May of 1969, cast and crew returned to the set of Bewitched for season #6. But during a rehearsal, Dick York suddenly collapsed.
He had a seizure on the set, and he went into a coma and was taken to the hospital.
It was horrendous, you know, very hard on all of us. You know, it's very hard to see somebody in pain.
According to doctors, York's seizure was caused by a crippling combination of painkillers and exhaustion. For Asher, York's diagnosis further complicated production of the series.
It was something that the studio was very concerned about and wanted to replace him. But I wouldn't do that. I said, no, I'm going to go with him.
But Asher's loyalty wasn't enough. ABC executives demanded that the director replace his lead actor.
It was very sad. We just couldn't go on any longer that way.
On April 24th, 1969, ABC aired the last episode of Bewitched with 41-year-old Dick York as the uptight but charming Darren Stevens.
Honey, those things happen in business. Why should I feel bad?
With Dick York no longer part of the team, William Asher and Elizabeth Montgomery set out to recast the role of Darren.
When Dick York went out of the show, we took off, remember, 4 weeks or so.
Asher reapproached 39-year-old actor Dick Sargent, his original choice to play Darren Stevens. A contractual commitment to Universal Studios prevented Sargent from accepting the role in 1964. This time he was free, and Sargent immediately signed on. But introducing a different Darren to loyal fans familiar with Dick York was a challenge.
I think that everybody talked about the different alternatives. Darren was such a significant part of the show that to have something happen to him and he gets killed or something like that would be too tragic.
Show producers struggled to find the right approach.
If they had endorsed switched Darren's looks, that would have put a wall up between Samantha and Endora, or even maybe have Samantha marry another mortal. The marriage had to be so special that there was only one mortal that Samantha could fall in love with. I mean, that was the whole point.
Asher decided that the best explanation was no explanation.
The audience knows this is an actor, and it's a different actor playing the same character.
There were hazards, obviously, in ending 1 year with one actor playing Darren and having another year start with another actor playing him. But I think it was pretty much decided that that was more agreeable to the alternatives.
Network executives helped the transition with a clever programming ploy.
That particular summer, ABC ran all the 14 non-Darren episodes in succession to make the presence of Darren not be there, so that when Dick Sargent showed up at the beginning of the 1969-70 season, it was not such an abrupt switch over in Darren's.
On September 18th, 1969, ABC launched Season 6 of Bewitched, and millions of Americans met a new Darren, played by Dick Sargent.
Darren, we have to settle on a name.
Sam, how many times have I told you never talk in the middle of somebody's backswing?
Sorry.
Writer, Saul Sachs.
The audience accepts it. You say, look, I'm a witch, okay? You say, okay. This is not here. This is on another planet, okay? Okay.
Show writer, Richard Bayer.
I think it was a gamble, and that paid off, and they were correct. I didn't hear of a deluge of letters saying what happened to Dick York. I didn't hear one letter.
Dick Sargent's resemblance to Dick York certainly didn't hurt. Sargent's friend, former actress Sheila Kuehl.
He always said to me that everybody thought Dick York was still on the show, because it was like the seamless transition of one tall, gangly white guy for another tall, gangly white guy.
While TV audiences readily accepted the new Darren, Dick Sargent had a tough time filling Dick York's shoes.
When Dick Sargent first did the show in the 6th season, they wanted him to act like York, but then they just let Dick Sargent be Dick Sargent afterwards. You know, instead of Dick York coming home and going, Sam, maybe Dick Sargent would, Sam.
Sam, what's going on?
I tried to not copy Dick York, but to give him the same attitudes, and he did them his way, and they were, I don't think, as effective.
It was our responsibility to make the changes as seamless as possible. So I found as a director that I was always trying to get Sargent to be a little bit more animated, like in the image of Dick York. But it wasn't part of his character. He was not Dick York.
For 5 seasons, Bewitched fans had come to rely on Darren's neurotic personality and animated reactions to Samantha's magic. cast member Casey Rogers.
I think Dick York had more of a rubbery face. He had the big eyes and he did the things with his mouth, and I think he was funnier in that respect.
Sargent chose to play the part differently.
Dick Sargent had a little less tendency to mug than did Dick York. Dick York's reactions were always very big. Dick Sargent conveyed the message that he didn't like it, but he was a little calmer.
I really crack you up, don't I?
And less hokey in his exasperation.
Despite the smooth transition from York to Sargent, the magic of Bewitched was beginning to fade, and so were the ratings. In the fall of 1969, Bewitched took flight for season number 6. The transition from Dick York to Dick Sargent playing the irascible Darren Stevens was seamless. But Sargent's life away from the soundstage was another story altogether.
Now, how do you sort of run away from home?
Instead of walking out a door, you just climb up a beanstalk.
Part of the magic of Bewitched was its ability to evolve and repeatedly surprise audiences. And once again, art imitated life when 36-year-old Elizabeth Montgomery shared her third pregnancy with the rest of America.
Sam?
In 1965, her son Robert was born, and a daughter, Tabitha, was added to the cast. And on October 16, 1969, soon after the birth of Elizabeth's daughter, Rebecca, Tabitha welcomed a little brother, Adam.
Sweetheart, here's your new baby brother.
How do you like him?
He's very nice. How long is he going to stay here?
2 kids, a devilish cousin, a busybody mother-in-law, a wacky doctor, a wackier uncle.
Hi, gorgeous.
Why not an anxiety-ridden aunt? Enter 43-year-old Tony Award-winning stage actress Alice Ghostley, who joined the cast in late 1969 as Esmeralda.
What she brought mostly was just to entertain the kids. They were smarter than she was. They got away with murder with her. But it was just another character, I think. They all had peculiarities, all the witches.
Physical comedy became a staple of Bewitched. As the befuddled Darren Stevens, Dick Sargent was especially adept at pie-in-the-face humor.
So, if you'll excuse me, I'll just bow out.
39-year-old Dick Sargent openly strutted his comedic talent on camera, but behind the scenes, he harbored a hidden secret.
Well, I've managed pretty well up to now.
Sargent wanted to work in television in the late 60s, so he kept his sexuality locked away in the closet.
That's some tight dress is what it is.
Sargent's friend, former actress Sheila Kewell.
If he was silent, he would be safe. And that's the way it is for most actors, because most people know they're gay. And the only thing the producers want is that the show not suffer for the knowledge that the actor is gay.
Publicist Howard Bragman.
This was after the Hollywood Confidential era, which outed a lot of people, and sort of before the heavy tabloid area. And I think it was a gentle time, and people just sort of quietly lived their lives and didn't talk about it.
American audiences saw their favorite actors through rose-colored glasses, exactly the image agents and producers wanted to project.
Everybody who was on the company knew it. I don't think the audience knew it, but they didn't know that Rock Hudson was either, and he was more famous than Dick Sargent. And people weren't outing other people in those times.
They were playing the parts of Samantha and Darren, and actors play parts that are not them, and so a gay actor can play the husband of somebody else, and that's the way they handle it.
The performances were right, but the chemistry was somehow wrong. Director William Asher.
The relationship with Dick York and Samantha was very passionate. They were in love and they acted like it, and it was obvious. With Dick Sargent, it wasn't quite as convincing.
Fans of Bewitched took notice, and they began turning the channel.
The show's ratings went down quite a bit. Dick Sargent was an incredible man, one of the sweetest guys you'd ever want to know, but the ratings did go down.
When season 6 wrapped in April 1970, Bewitched had fallen to number 25 in the ratings, from a high of number 2 in 1965. A few months later, cast and crew began filming season 7, but the spark was gone.
We were running out. We were getting tired. I think we were losing audience. And we were running out of ideas. We really were.
You've shown them in so many different aspects of the same environment, the same character, the same reaction. No matter how much you like it, eventually you're repeating yourself, and I think the audience gets a little tired of it too. But the actors do before the audience does.
Especially the star of Bewitched. 37-year-old Elizabeth Montgomery was tired of the daily grind and the sugary sweetness of Samantha.
TV was going to become a little edgier, a little more aware, a little darker, I think, than the sunny world of Bewitched could probably maintain.
Bewitched music supervisor Don Kirshner.
More relevant themes were happening, more religious themes, more racial themes, where you could talk about things that you couldn't do in the early 60s. And I think Norman Lear brought that to television and started a whole new trend.
Norman Lear was a veteran television producer, and in the fall of 1970, he launched a groundbreaking new show, All in the Family.
It was not a show of avoidance. It was not a show of skirting issues. It was a show of confronting these issues, confronting different points of view, confronting bigotry.
All in the Family combined big laughs with biting social commentary. Bewitched suddenly looked stale and sophomoric.
I was just wishing and wishing that Lisa and me could be really, really sisters. And look what happened.
I don't think that it could have existed if you thought that, you know, you could have gotten on a train half an hour away from Archie Bunkerland and been in the world of Samantha Stevens.
The growing feminist movement brought more changes to the television landscape. Feminist historian Camille Paglia.
The Mary Tyler Moore Show would reflect where women were going in the final decades of the century. Mary is free. She has no man to tie her down. Though she wants a love relationship, it no longer is defining who she is in the world.
Samantha, despite her unearthly powers, was living on borrowed time.
By the 1970s, Bewitched came to seem claustrophobic, with the housewife imprisoned by her role.
In early 1972, midway through the 8th season, 39-year-old Elizabeth Montgomery and her husband, William Asher, came to a decision.
We've gone 8 years, and we had a contract for 9 years. And the network was ambivalent about it. They would have gone on, but Liz didn't want to do it anymore. It was time. It had its run.
And Bewitched had a great run. With more than 254 episodes and years of top ratings, Bewitched had cast its last spell. On March 25th, 1972, ABC aired the final episode of Bewitched, and with it, the end of an era.
But I love you, and that is the truth, the whole truth, and etc.
Coming. The spring of 1972 marked the final season of Bewitched. Elizabeth Montgomery, America's favorite witch, joined the ranks of the unemployed. After 8 magical years on ABC, Samantha Stevens hung up her broom and Bewitched vanished from the airwaves with little fanfare.
I will see you all at the earliest possible convenience.
My mom told me, it was summertime, and I think she called me in from the pool and said that we weren't coming back for another season. And I went to Girl Scout camp instead, so I mean, it wasn't totally terrible.
Many of the show's colorful characters went on to other projects, but one former cast member wasn't as lucky. After back problems forced him to leave Bewitched in 1969, Dick York's addiction to painkillers took over his life. York kicked his habit in 1971, but his problems continued to mount. In 1976, York, the father of 5 children, lost his savings in a bad real estate investment. Penniless, York applied for welfare.
The money left him. You know, if you don't work for a while, it's hard to keep up. So I know several of us sent him money.
A few minor TV roles came York's way, but not enough to revive his career. In 1986, Dick York abandoned Hollywood and moved his family to Michigan to care for his elderly mother-in-law. Later that year, York, a 3-pack-a-day smoker, was diagnosed with emphysema. Undaunted, the 60-year-old actor contributed to Dwelling Place, a private fundraising effort to help street people.
He managed to cut government red tape, and he was getting blankets and warm bedding and sleeping bags, and he'd organize a whole list of guys with trucks to go and deliver this stuff.
We had a talk once where he said if you're ever out somewhere and you see a homeless person, he said you shouldn't give them money, you should pack an extra sandwich in the morning or something like that and give them food and give them something that they need. There was a time where he was so sick and he was on oxygen and was basically bedridden, and he was still raising money for homeless shelters.
On February 20th, 1992, Dick York lost his battle with emphysema. He was 63 years old when he died. The post-Bewitched life of the other Darren was a mix of highs and lows. In 1978, Sargent suffered a personal tragedy when he lost his partner of 20 years.
I couldn't publicly mourn him. I could with my friends. I couldn't say that my lover died. Even the obituary, it was before the days of longtime companion.
Dick Sargent dealt with his grief by immersing himself in his work, landing bit parts on popular television shows like Fantasy Island. Then, in 1989, 59-year-old Sargent learned he had prostate cancer. The private Sargent kept the diagnosis to himself. He also continued to keep his sexuality a secret.
When my lover was alive, he felt very strongly about being in the closet, and that I had a phony ex-wife in my bio and all this stuff, which everybody did in those days.
2 years later, in 1991, a national magazine threatened to expose Sargent's sexuality, and the actor took action.
He was just frantic about it. People finding out, and he wasn't telling them.
When you're at the mercy of the tabloids, and they say I have AIDS, they say that I'm gay, whatever they want to say, you have to fight them. And if you're in the closet, you have to come out publicly to do it.
He decided that the best thing that he could do would be to come out on National Coming Out Day.
In October 1991, at a rally at the Los Angeles Gay and Lesbian Center, Sargent announced to the world that he was gay.
He got a very, very long standing ovation, and it moved him very much, because it's very difficult to describe what it's like to be in the closet and how fractured your life is. And at that moment, I looked at his face. It was almost like you could see a weight lift off of his shoulders, and he felt like he had suddenly found this place where the truth could be told.
After years of hiding his sexual orientation, Dick Sargent became a role model.
He was willing to be sort of a poster boy for gay actors who were now willing to talk about their experience. And in a way, I think he felt that it was his duty.
When I first came to Hollywood, there were no role models. There still really aren't many for gay and lesbian people. I get letters that are meaningful, letters that are thankful, letters that full of love. I have stories that I will carry to my grave that were just beautiful. I feel like I've done a very good thing, and I'm proud of myself.
In 1992, organizers of the Los Angeles Gay Pride celebration chose Sargent for their highest honor.
CSW voted that he should be their Man of the Year in the parade, and they asked him if he would ask Elizabeth if she would be willing to ride in the parade too.
I think it was important for her because she knew that she was such an influence on so many people. It gave her the ability to make a difference, and she felt that that was a responsibility of hers to do.
By 1994, Sargent's cancer had progressed, and doctors feared the end was near. Troubled by the news, Sargent was concerned that his recent coming out would lead the public to the wrong conclusion.
He thought that everyone would think he had AIDS because he was gay, which of course, not everyone who's gay has AIDS, and not everyone who's gay and died of AIDS. And he was afraid, I guess, that it would simply be taken for granted that was his illness.
On July 8th, 1994, 64-year-old Dick Sargent succumbed to the cancer. Sargent passed away at the Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. For Elizabeth Montgomery, the star of Bewitched, the end of the series marked the beginning of her independence. After 8 years of playing Samantha Stevens, 39-year-old Elizabeth planned on spending time with her children and husband, William Asher. But Asher took on another television pilot.
I was swamped, and I didn't have the sense to realize that she was suddenly left out.
Elizabeth's marriage was crumbling. Distraught, she went to Europe to sort out her life.
When Bewitched was over, I should have said, come on, let's take a trip, let's go to Europe, let's go around the world, let's just do things. And I didn't. And I was dumb.
In 1974, Elizabeth and Bill agreed to end their 11-year union. But Elizabeth vowed not to let the split destroy her family.
There was no custody battles. There was no fighting over, where the kids were going to be taken care of. And they were very responsible about making it as easy and as little drama as possible.
In the spring of 1974, Elizabeth Montgomery accepted a role in a riveting television drama entitled A Case of Rape. Friend and former manager Barry Crossed.
The story is a lady gets raped, the rapist is set free, he rapes her again. They wanted to cut out the second rape, and she just responded by writing a list of other actresses that could play the part in her place if they cut out the rape, and sent that back to the network. And that was a typical Lizzie move.
The second rape stayed in the story, and the film was a critical success, garnering Elizabeth her 7th Emmy nomination.
She not only showed a dimension of acting that probably nobody had seen before, but was completely different than the character of Bewitched, and was a very important show for the developing of the movie form on television.
I believe at the time it was the highest viewed movie, made-for-television movie ever aired.
Later that same year, Elizabeth landed a role in the television movie Mrs. Sundance. Once again, work brought romance to the 41-year-old actress when she began dating her co-star, actor Robert Foxworth.
He was just taken by her wit and beauty and charm, and they had a great relationship together.
Elizabeth was in love with Foxworth, but gun-shy about walking down the aisle.
My mom had been married 3 times, and when she met Bob, their love for each other and devotion was stronger than any piece of paper was going to be. So she really never felt the need to go through and get married again.
Foxworth moved into Elizabeth's Beverly Hills home after the couple decided to live together.
He had 2 children of his own, and merging the families together was great.
With a new love and renewed interest in acting, Elizabeth returned to the small screen. In 1975, she accepted a role in the landmark television movie, The Legend of Lizzie Borden. Elizabeth portrayed the infamous axe murderer who was accused of killing her parents.
She loved playing wicked women. She liked playing murderesses. She liked playing the eviler the better.
Over the next decade, Elizabeth starred in a series of television movies. With her career soaring, Elizabeth was ready to make a commitment in her personal life. In the winter of 1993, Elizabeth and live-in boyfriend Robert Foxworth set a wedding date.
One day she rang me and said, I'm doing it. I said, really? I said, when? She named the date. I said, where? She said, your place.
19 years after falling in love, Elizabeth and Robert became husband and wife in a private ceremony.
They came to the apartment, I think, at 7 o'clock. She arrived, we had a little thing of flowers for her to hold, and a gentleman arrived with a robe on, and 5 minutes later he left, and apparently they were married, and we went out to dinner.
In 1994, Elizabeth starred in the TV movie The Corpse Had a Familiar Face, a movie based on real-life crime reporter Edna Buchanan.
She just had a certain glow. So many stars, when you see them on the screen, they're bigger than life. They have this magic and charisma, but if you met them on the street, you wouldn't look at them twice. They have the magic on the screen, but she had it all the time.
The following year, Elizabeth again portrayed Edna in the 1995 TV movie Deadline for Murder.
He heard the bad news, the sound of gunfire. Then he was dead.
But during the filming of the movie, Elizabeth became ill.
She told me she wanted to thin down because she felt she was too heavy. So she did, and I didn't think anything about it.
Convinced she had nothing more than a mild flu, Elizabeth continued working.
She was always very determined that they would not fall behind schedule. She was so much of a trooper. So even though she was ill, they shot the scenes in the rain, they worked all night. She would get soaked, go back to the trailer, dry off, rest a little bit, and come back and shoot it again.
Family members pleaded with Elizabeth to go to the doctor, but she refused.
I have a feeling that she knew that she was sick, you know, much sooner than anybody else knew, and she was very much in denial of anything overcoming and beating her.
She wanted everything to be always light and fun and airy, like she was in a secret garden of some kind, and it just will last forever, and life is not like that.
In the end, it was her husband, Robert Foxworth, who convinced Elizabeth to seek help.
Bob said, you gotta go to the doctor, you gotta go to the hospital and see what's going on.
Doctors delivered devastating news. Elizabeth had colon cancer.
That hit pretty hard, you know? It's pretty rude awakening, and just felt so premature. I mean, she was so young and vivacious and full of life still. And I had never seen her, you know, vulnerable or so afraid of losing us, losing her.
In April 1995, 62-year-old Elizabeth underwent exploratory surgery. Sadly, the operation revealed that the cancer had spread. In the face of the diagnosis, Elizabeth remained strong and confident.
She did maintain some amazing strength in her own character when we'd visit her, and it was like, you know, everything was fine. You know, don't worry. You know, I'll be okay, you'll be okay.
A few days after her surgery, Elizabeth asked to be released from the hospital.
She wanted to come home and not be in the hospital during her last days with us.
Back at home, Elizabeth reached out to a few close friends.
And I sent her this little card, and she said, "Hi, Dizzy, I loved your card," she said. And she said, "I got it right on the bed, I can look at it, and it looks just like me." And I said, "I thought so too." And then there was this silence, and I said, "So what's new?" And she said, "Ah, you wouldn't believe." And those are the last words we said. We said goodbye, and that was it. And it seems right.
On May 18th, 1995, Elizabeth Montgomery died quietly in her sleep at her home in Beverly Hills.
Being with her was very sad and very difficult, but you know, I believe in her spirit, and everybody has one, and that we go on.
Coming up. On May 18th, 1995, 62-year-old Elizabeth Montgomery lost her battle with colon cancer. News of her death spread quickly as family and friends gathered to say their final goodbyes. Memorial services for Elizabeth were held on June 18th, 1995 at the Cannon Theater in Beverly Hills.
It was joyful of her life more than sad at her passing. I think the interesting thing is, because it was 1995 and Bewitched had been off the air for 23 years. The people who were in her life at the time she passed away were not at all related to anything she did on Bewitched.
We worked very hard to keep the press away from the funeral, and you know, there's still people who are going to stalk a little and do their paparazzi number, but we did a pretty effective job of keeping people away. And it was probably a little more tribute than she would have liked, but that's what happens when people die.
Years after her death, family and friends continue to pay tribute to Elizabeth.
If she was your friend, she was there. Good times, bad times, she was there. And if she was in your life, somehow you went to bed at night and the world was just a little bit safer. And very few people have that effect on you.
I bought a chair that is just the most god-awful looking thing in the world that belonged to her. And I'm going to sit in it, I'm going to put it in my bedroom and sit in it and remember the day that she bought it, because I was with her. Palm trees and all kinds of strange colors on it. And I'm going to sit there and think of Lizzie.
Somebody who had a great compassion for life and people, and a responsibility to her family, and a career, and one who would stand up for what she believed in, and so many things, you know. She was great. Can you tell I'm proud of her?
I think it was her enduring self that captured people. Really, really liked Elizabeth. It was hard not to. I was the main one. I liked her a lot. It was a very deep love.
The memory of Elizabeth Montgomery and the magic of Bewitched will not be forgotten. Through cable stations, including the Columbia Screen Gems cable channel, audiences around the world will continue to enjoy the show and its enchanting characters for generations to come.
There is a lot of great programming out there today, but it's great that you have the option to watch some of the older shows too. And Bewitched has held up so well over the years. I mean, I don't think it seems dated.
It's tireless. The stories are good, the dialogue is good, the people were wonderful, the clothes are not too bad, they've held up pretty well. It's still a new show. It's so gratifying to go do many of these autograph signing shows and things, and parents come in with their children and say, I grew up watching Bewitched, and now my kids watch.
And the sweetness of Elizabeth Montgomery, and the brilliance of the concept and the show. And it may seem dated, and it may seem corny by some standards, but of its time, it was just a little bit of heaven, and I loved it.
In the final interview before her death on July 20th, 1999, Sandra Gould summed up the program.
Well, it was a magical show, and everybody wants a little magic. It was a great cast. Everything clicked. It was just one of those wonderful shows that started and clicked immediately.
It was kind of an escape for people to watch and think, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could just twitch our noses and everything would be fine.
Welcome to 1164 Morning Glory Circle. This is the home of Darren and Samantha Stevens. It's about 10 feet wide, that's all, and it has a dirt floor.
And you know what it is? It's the mouth, it's not the nose.
And she had a cute nose, and to watch her nose go